We once walked on the moon, but then we stopped. No humans has set foot on the lunar surface since 1972. So the question is, why? To answer that, we need to rewind. The 1960s weren't just about peace signs and rock and roll. They were about rivalry, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Space became the ultimate stage for that rivalry. The Soviets struck first. The first satellite, Sputnik, the first animal in orbit, Laika, the first man, Yuri Gagarin, and the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova. Each milestone embarrassed America and pushed it deeper into a desperate race to catch up. So the US made a decision. They wouldn't just send people to space, they would send people to the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
John F. Kennedy stood before Congress and declared, "Before this decade is out, we will land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth." And in July 1969, Apollo 11 made it happen. Neil Armstrong took that one small step, and the United States declared victory in the space race.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But here's what we don't often talk about. Apollo was a product of war, not peace. The US government poured money into it. NASA budget hit 4.5% of the entire federal budget in 1966. Adjusted for today, that's over $40 billion in a year. The missions were breathtaking, but they were also brutally expensive. By the time Apollo 17 wrapped up in 1972, the program had cost the modern equivalent of $150 billion. And once the US had beaten the Soviets to the moon, the motivation dried up. The Cold War raged on, but the space race was effectively won. To politicians in Washington, Apollo was no longer an urgent necessity. It was a luxury, so they cut funding. Planned missions, Apollo 18, 19, and 20, were scrapped. The rockets that could have gone to the moon ended up in museums. NASA didn't give up on space though. They just shifted focus. Instead of returning to a barren, airless world, they built the Space Shuttle. They helped create the International Space Station, a base in orbit run by multiple nations. They set their sights on Mars, sending probes and rovers to explore the red planet. And while NASA slowed its pace on the moon, other nations stepped forward. Japan developed the Hiten probe in 1990s, their first lunar mission. And today, JAXA continued to study the moon and beyond. India's space agency, ISRO, launched Chandrayaan's mission to map the lunar surface and even attempted landings. And perhaps the most ambitious of them all, China's CNSA landed the Chang'e 4 spacecraft on the dark side of the moon. This was the first time in human history anyone had touched that mysterious region. So while American astronauts haven't returned since Apollo, the moon has never really been ignored. The torch of exploration simply passed around the world. But human footprints on the moon, those became a memory. And that's where the mystery crept in. If we could go to the moon with 1960s technology, why haven't we gone back today? That gap fueled conspiracy theories. Some claim that the landing never happened, that they were faked on a Hollywood set. Others whisper about alien bases on the far side of the moon or fleets of hidden spacecrafts.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
There's even the wild idea that the moon itself is a hollow, giant artificial structure. Of course, none of this is supported by science. But in the absence of new human missions, the myth have only grown stronger. The real reason why we haven't been back is less glamorous: money and politics. Sending humans to the moon is just expensive and dangerous. And when politicians weigh billions of dollars, they often prefer projects with more immediate returns. Unmanned probes and rovers were cheaper and safer. They don't need oxygen, food, or water. They don't risk lives. And they've been exploring not just the moon, but Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the entire solar system. Meanwhile, private companies like SpaceX have entered the stage, changing the economics of spaceflight entirely. And now, decades after Apollo, NASA is finally returning to the moon. The Artemis program aims to land astronauts back on the moon by the late 2026. This time, not just to plant flags or take photos, but to build the foundations of a permanent presence. So why did NASA stop going to the moon? Because Apollo achieved its purpose, winning the space race. And once that was done, the money, the urgency, the political will all vanish. But here's the thing, the dream of the moon never truly died. It was just paused, waiting for a new generation, new technology, and new reasons to reach for it again. And now, after 50 years later, that dream is stirring once more. Not as a race of nations, but as humanity's next step into the stars.